Good afternoon. I am William Theo for PTV News Now. At the top of this afternoon's news leaderboard, President Marcos Jr. seeks a higher outlay for calamity funding for next fiscal year, and the budget increase his government seeks is substantial, an 11.5 billion or 51% upgrade from this year's 20.5 to 31 billion pesos. This hefty raise request is to effectively boost government's disaster response with the incidence of extreme weather more likely than ever as from the fallout from climate change worsens or exacerbates with El Niño's year-long and unforgiving extreme heat and dry spell nationwide and Typhoon Karina's extensive flooding in the megacity still fresh in mind. The president's budget request raise for next year was disclosed earlier today by the deputy chairperson of the House Committee on Appropriations, Makati Representative Luis Campos Jr., whose panel is tasked to pore over the national budget, said the committee is in full support of the president's proposed request. Of the proposed 31 billion peso budget sought, at least 14.7 billion will be earmarked for capital outlay for the repair or reconstruction of damaged infra or permanent structures such as roads, bridges, and school buildings. And after an extraordinary 2.5 weeks of splendid and spectacular athletic performances on the world stage, the City of Lights and Love rang down the curtains on the 2024 Summer Games, whose everlasting theme of Sitius, Altius, Fortius, Faster, Higher, and Stronger perfectly sums up the Olympic theme of competition, where private dreams of victory meshes seamlessly with public ritual and entertainment. Indeed, it was a sight to behold as the audience watched behind the suspended Olympic rings logo, which represents the 5 inhabited continents of the world, and soaked in the boom and bang of fireworks in Stade de France in Saint-Denis. Likewise, the silhouetted images of a huge billboard in muted gratitude and spectators seconding the message by clapping. Clapping of artists and acrobats in white for a dance number on stage, and IOC President Thomas Bach with a group of select athletes flashing the manual heart symbol, and the audience and athletes slapping fives in the final parade, while a rapt audience watched outside the stadium and couples celebrated each other's dancing, and the athletes filed into the stadium to wave goodbye and wish each other well with the next Summer Games in the City of Angels in sight, and an endless stream of memorable moments of men and women in their finest hours. It may well be the decisive demographic in the United States presidential elections in November that could push Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, or former President Donald Trump and VP candidate Senator J.D. Vance, over the top: the youth vote. And as VOA's Tina Trin reports, it's all about turnout.
A growing share of U.S. voters are young people who could play a pivotal role in the general election this November, perhaps even helping to elect the first woman president in U.S. history. That is, if they turn out to vote.
The reasons why young people are a little bit more dubious about showing up this election cycle is directly tied to their frustration with how our current government is working. Young people are experiencing a lot of frustration because they're not seeing change happen at the speed in which they would like to see it happen in their communities.
But since Vice President Kamala Harris became the Democratic presidential nominee, there's been a notable shift in terms of excitement.
The numbers with young voters in particular were great. On enthusiasm especially, we saw a 5 percentage point increase in young voters' intent to vote basically overnight.
19-year-old Celeste Galvez is one of those who's feeling energized by the change.
I was not really planning on even voting in the first place, but now that he's dropped out and Kamala's running, I'm more excited for stepping into a new world where you can have a woman as a president. I'm actually excited about politics now.
The excitement has translated to a spike in new voter registrations. Vote.org reported over 100,000 people registering to vote in the 7 days after Joe Biden announced he was stepping down, with voters ages 18 to 34 making up nearly 85% of those new registrations. But the presidential race remains close. And there are equal numbers of young voters, particularly young men, who favor former President Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee.
A lot of them don't find that the U.S. economy as a whole works for them. So when Democrats talk about record job growth, huge number of jobs that President Biden has created, they don't see themselves in that framework.
26-year-old Frankie Russell is one of them.
The way to get my age is that you got to talk to my age group. We can't be running the same low taxes, the claim of we just lower taxes, guns, and faith. I'm like, well, that's not enough. We need other stuff. We need American first policy in general. No new wars. No sending our money overseas, but keeping it at home.
Frustration does not equal apathy. Young people actually understand what's happening in politics. They care about what's going on. They're just not seeing the change that they want to see be actuated through engaging in the electoral process. But I think that the switch up that has happened over the last couple of weeks has definitely created a new trajectory.
Whether that trajectory will extend to the ballot box remains to be seen. But it's clear that young voters should not be discounted come November. Tina Trin, VOA News, New York.
And that's a wrap for this afternoon's program. Join me anew later tonight for the evening edition of our doubleheader news breaks. William Theo urging you to stay connected by catching the news right here, and thank you for watching PTV News Now.